Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Jessica and the topic of today's video is a book review of this book, When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. When No One Is Watching is a thriller. It was published in 2020 and it was published by HarperCollins. It is 352 pages in length and it was written by Alyssa Cole. Alyssa Cole is a best-selling author. She typically writes romance and historical romance, and she's been critically acclaimed by organizations like the New York Times, Kirkus, Entertainment Weekly, and more. That was the most I could find on Alyssa Cole. I would like to read more of her books because this book is so good. If you like thrillers, you must read When No One Is Watching. I do believe that this is her first thriller because she does typically write romance. I could be wrong though. If I am, please feel free to correct me in the comments down below. Let me read you the blurb on the back of the book. Sydney Green is Brooklyn born and raised, but her beloved neighborhood seems to change every time she blinks. Condos are sprouting up like weeds, for sale signs are popping up overnight, and the neighbors she's known all her life are disappearing. To hold on to her community's past and present, Sydney channels her frustration into a walking tour and finds an unlikely and unwanted assistant in one of her new arrivals to the block, her neighbor Theo. But Sydney and Theo's deep dive into history quickly becomes a dizzying descent into paranoia and fear. The neighbors may not have moved to the suburbs after all, and the push to revitalize the community may be more deadly than advertised. When does coincidence become conspiracy? Where do people go when gentrification pushes them out? Can Sydney and Theo trust each other or themselves long enough to find out before they too disappear? This book, as it is described, it's about gentrification of a neighborhood in Brooklyn. Sydney is the protagonist, but the point of view is split between Sydney and Theo. The chapters tend to rotate between the two of them. Theo is Sydney's new neighbor. He's a white guy. Sydney is a black woman, and she's lived in this part of Brooklyn all of her life, and it's home to her. She's come back to Brooklyn after experiencing a nasty divorce, and she's really looking for that sense of comfort and security that her home offered her. Unfortunately, she doesn't find that sense of comfort and security because this gentrification process that the white folks are imposing on her neighborhood is pretty scary. I checked this book out from my library. That is the source that I pulled it from. That is one of the stats that I am going to be tracking in January of 2020. If you've watched my 2021 reading goals, I mentioned that. I'll link you to that video up here. I loved this book. I thought it was a well done thriller when we're looking at genre. The beginning is kind of a slow burn, and then at about 2/3 of the way through, woo, it picks up. It picks up. It made me viscerally uncomfortable at points, which means that it's a very well done piece of writing. This book made me think about my neighborhood in ways that I have never thought about it before. I live in a city in Iowa. It's a smaller city comparatively speaking. It's Waterloo, Iowa, but Waterloo, Iowa has a large black culture and a large population of black residents. And my neighborhood is actually primarily made up of black residents. And my neighborhood isn't necessarily experiencing gentrification, but it's definitely made me look at my community with a more critical lens. And I know that certain parts of Waterloo have experienced issues with gentrification, and I want to know more about that. Like, this book has really inspired me. Alyssa Cole has really inspired me to do more of a deep dive into my own community's history and culture because it's rich and interesting, but I also just need to be educated on this so that should gentrification become an issue again, I can help stop that from happening, to the best a single citizen can. But this book just really motivated me to be more community centered, to learn more about my community and be more knowledgeable on it. I can tell you where all the good shopping places are, where all the good restaurants are, but I couldn't give you an oral history of my city. And to me, that feels problematic, especially having read this and walking through Sydney and Theo's process of learning about Brooklyn's history and how it just completely changed and shaped the way they approached their neighborhood and valued their neighborhood. I think that me diving into the history of my own city could have that same effect on me and reshaping the way that I think about my neighborhood and value my neighborhood. I have often felt like an outsider, not because of my race, but just because I haven't lived in Iowa all my life. And like Iowa in general is very root centric, like no matter race, like Iowa's very much like I was born and raised here. Like my family goes back generations. Like that's a big thing here in Iowa. And so personally, I have not invested much in developing my own roots here. And I think part of developing your roots in a community is knowing the history, and I think that needs to be something that I take on, because I have lived in Waterloo for 4 years now, and I don't plan on moving because I have purchased my home. It's where I want to be, it's where I like to live, and I've gotten to know my neighbors pretty well, but I have not spent the time that I should learning about the history of my community. So long story short, Alyssa Cole and this book has changed my life in that I am going to commit to this and really do a more thorough examination of my community, its history, learning more about the people who I live with and know and interact with. And I guess maybe it's my whiteness that prevented me from doing that in the past. Maybe it was the sense of having not been born and raised in Iowa that has prevented me from doing that in the past. And I also think it was maybe this sense that Iowa was like a stop in the road for me and not the final destination that prevented me from doing that. But I'm pretty sure this is where my roots are going to be. And I need to start growing those roots in a better soil, I guess is the point that I'm trying to make. Aside from that, this book also reminded me of the importance of investigative journalism, because when Sydney and Theo are getting their hands on certain documents, certain text messages, certain online communications that they screenshot or have access to, as I was reading this, all I could think was, you guys need a good investigative journalist to take on those documents, to make a story, and to basically put Virentech to task in the media. Virentech is the corporation that's moving into Brooklyn in this story and is a big part of the gentrification process. And a lot of the neighbors really don't want this company to move in because they're really shady. And golly, a good investigative journalist could have taken them to task and not only exposed what was going on in Brooklyn, but followed those crumbs and exposed what was going on in other communities that Virentech had their tendrils in as well. And so, yeah, this really made me think about that. It made me think about the movie Spotlight, if you have seen that movie, which is about the spotlight through the Boston newspaper that investigated the scandal with Catholic priests molesting young children. And that all came to light because of investigative journalists. It didn't come to light because of the victims. It came to light because we had some journalists who decided to listen to the victims and get that story out there. And so when it comes to things like this with gentrification, if people have those kinds of documents and that kind of evidence, find a good investigative journalist who can tackle that story, and it can really just bust the doors wide open on some of these shady deals and problems that are happening within a particular community. Overall, the writing was excellent. The flip-flop between Theo and Sydney was such a cool way to see what was happening from two different viewpoints. So you saw it from Sydney, who is the black woman who's lived there her whole life, and then you saw the situation from Theo's point of view. And Theo's not necessarily a bad person, he's just got his white folk blinders on, you know. He is completely unaware that he and his girlfriend Kim have purchased this new brownstone in Brooklyn, and it's part of a problem. You know, he just sees it as like, hey, I have a new neighborhood, I have a new home, I get to know these new people. But he eventually learns while he is working with Sydney on this project that he is part of the problem. And then it's interesting to see as he learns where his blind spots are and the way he figures out those blind spots. The interactions between Sydney and Theo are so fun because they have a safe word, which is howdy doody, for any time Theo is starting to become so white that Sydney has to become like his caretaker, like his white fragility, right? And so, like, it's interesting to watch those two sort of navigate this relationship between a white man and a black woman and how they address the issues of race within that relationship. So there's just so many layers in this book, so much to think about, so much to learn from. And Alyssa Cole has based this story on a lot of really sound research. So even in the back of the book, she provides some additional reading material that talks about some of the real life cases of gentrification within Brooklyn and in the city of New York and how black communities have been affected by that. So absolutely fantastic book. Loved it. Gave it 5 stars out of 5. I recommend it to anyone and everyone. It's an easy, quick read, and it will keep you on the edge of your seat, and you will learn a lot. You might even be able to address some internalized issues within yourself if you are reading this. And yeah, that is what I have to say about this. I'm thinking about doing maybe a video series based on what I've learned from this and how it's affected my life, you know, as I learn more about my own community, sharing with you what I've learned. And it could be a fun little homework project from Miss Alyssa Cole. All right. I do want to share a couple quotes from you, or not from you, quotes with you from the book. Okay, so this is from Theo's point of view as he is learning about his own internalized racism. So before this evening, she was, and she being Sydney, she was the woman from the tour, and then the woman I watched from my window. My run-ins with her had either been abrupt and awkward or from a detached distance, like watching a character in a Sims video game go about her business. Now she feels real, I guess. All of the neighbors I spoke to do. I hadn't thought of them as real people. Even when I chatted with Mr. Perkins, even when I'd watched from my window or observed people during my walks, I hadn't really been seeing them. It's a startling realization, but to be fair, I've spent most of my life having to quickly categorize people as either a threat or something else. That doesn't leave much room for having to think about their past or their feelings or whatever. Woo! So again, that's like from Theo's perspective. Whew, youch. Let's see. This is a quote from page 132 about what Sydney is learning as she's doing a deep dive into the history of Black Brooklyn. So she's at an exhibit at a museum. She says the next exhibition was an overview of historic race riots in New York, starting with the slave uprisings of 1712. Apparently fires kept breaking out in Manhattan, and instead of dealing with the reality that a town made of wood structures was going to have some fires, someone decided they were being set by enslaved people fomenting rebellion, leading to death and dismemberment for dozens of Black New Yorkers, free and enslaved. Free and enslaved New York. Okay? I'd immediately thought of Kim threatening to call the police on me because I didn't let her cut me in line, and I wondered if all those people died because of the historical equivalent of a Bodega Becky. Chills. That gives me so many chills, but it also makes me think a lot about some of the rioting we had this summer here in 2020. Just gonna put that out there. Let's see. This is Theo again. So this is Theo reflecting on moving to the neighborhood and the experience he had with realtors. I look at the clean, reimagined future of the neighborhood. This is what was sold to me and Kim by the realtors. They talked of revitalization and changing demographics, and I nodded along because of course that had nothing to do with me, but I'd still get to reap the benefits. And when there are benefits to be reaped, there's always someone ready to do some illegal shit to get even more of them. It's on page 263. Ugh, Alyssa Cole. Brilliant. Chef's kiss. And this is towards the end, Theo again, when he is having to decide whether or not he wants to help Sydney in a violent situation or not. So this is page 308. This conspiracy may very well be real, but like Sydney just said, this isn't my neighborhood. I already put money down on a shitty room, so he eventually gets kicked out of his house and he has to leave this particular neighborhood because his girlfriend Kim is one of the worst people alive, I swear. But anyway, I already put money down on a shitty room. I could put this gun down and leave. I'd be safe. Any of the cops surging down the street who saw me would assume I was with them. And if I walk away from this, pretend it never happened, I might as well be. Chills. Whew. All right. If you read this book, please let me know what your thoughts are, what you think of it, how it's helped you rethink your own neighborhood and communities. I do want to have a discussion question for you if you want to comment down below. Tell me something that you know about the history of your current city or community. And if you don't know the history of your current city or community, what is one action step you plan to take to learn? That's it for today's video. Until next time, make sure to read good books, drink good coffee, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye!